Welcome to CEO Insights. I'm Marilyn de Guzman with InvestingNews.com. Nuclear Fuels Corp is continuing to accelerate exploration of its uranium projects in Wyoming, leveraging the projected growth in uranium demand as countries around the world expand their nuclear energy capacities. Discussing this market dynamic with me is Greg Huffman, CEO and President of Nuclear Fuels. Hi, Greg.
Good morning, Marilyn. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
So let's start our conversation with your take on the current supply and demand landscape for uranium, especially as projections indicate that the world's nuclear energy capacity will increase 2.5 times the current capacity by 2050. What impact do you think this will have on uranium projects?
Absolutely, no, and it's a very, very exciting time in the nuclear space globally. I've been involved with the nuclear and uranium sector back to 2003 when I was a uranium analyst covering the equities, and 2003 through 2008 was an incredibly explosive time in the cycle, really driven by some supply interruptions that happened for large projects in Saskatchewan that were scheduled to come online, which saw the spot price increase from just under $7 to over $138 per pound, and with phenomenal returns for many of the equities in the space at that time. Contrast that to now, and we actually have an even better setup because not only do we have curtailments in terms of ongoing supply issues, particularly out of Kazakhstan, but we also have massive increases in terms of expected demand for uranium as nuclear power has very much come back into vogue in terms of the 24/7 clean, green, available power that's really going to be required for not just traditional uses, but expanding energy consumption related to data centers and the overall growth in AI, as well as Bitcoin-related mining. So really, nuclear is incredibly well positioned, and really what we at Nuclear Fuels are focused on is being able to come up with new sources of domestic U.S. uranium to help supply that increase in demand for nuclear power.
Right. So yeah, let's talk about the U.S. On the U.S. side of things, where most of your projects are located. The U.S. imports about 95% of its uranium for nuclear energy. So uranium projects such as yours are consequential to the U.S. ambitions of developing domestic supply. What kind of government supports are available for companies like yourself, and how are you leveraging those supports?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of government support available, really as the U.S. Works very, very hard to reestablish a domestic nuclear fuel supply chain that basically sort of, brings the production of right from the production of uranium through the conversion to the enrichment to the fuel fabrication, everything right across the entire fuel cycle back in-house domestically in the U.S. Really, you mentioned, the massive amounts of imports that, are coming into the U.S. One of the key factors that really was, integral to my joining the company was the focus on domestic U.S. uranium production. It's a little known fact that the U.S. used to be self-sufficient from a uranium production perspective, i.e. the U.S. back in the 70s and 80s produced all the uranium domestically that they required for their nuclear generation requirements. So the U.S. is very well endowed geologically with uranium. However, they're generally lower grade deposits than we see elsewhere in the world, and therefore higher cost, and that requires a higher uranium price. But that's what we're seeing right now. So basically, over the last few years, we've seen uranium production fall off to almost zero domestically in the U.S. But at current uranium prices, we're starting to see some of those previously shuttered operations come back online and ramp back up. What we're focused on at Nuclear Fuels, though, is making new incremental discoveries in the U.S. for in situ recoverable uranium, which really is a very well-known technology used globally, responsible for about 60% of global uranium production, but very, very low environmental impact, and quite attractive from a capital cost perspective as well. So that's really what we're focused on, is making new discoveries in the U.S. that are amenable to the ISR process.
What can you tell us about sort of the government supports that are available, especially for uranium projects, as the U.S. really tries to ramp up their domestic supply?
Yeah, there's a couple of levels of support that are available, and really, I'd start off with at the federal level, where even before the election, there's an incredible amount of bipartisan support from both the Democrats and the Republicans to reestablish that domestic nuclear fuel supply chain. So there's a huge amount sort of initiative there. And then, if we go down to the state level, particularly in Wyoming, Wyoming is what we call an agreement state. So overall, the nuclear sector in the U.S. is overseen by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or the NRC. And however, there are certain states that have agreements with the NRC that basically allow all the permitting related to nuclear related activities to be done at the state level. And Wyoming is one of those states, as is Texas. So, that's really important because it, greatly accelerates the permitting path to advance uranium exploration development projects through permitting and get them into production as quickly as possible. And this is really evidenced by, the number of restarts that we're seeing currently in the state of Wyoming of past producing projects, as well as our parent company, Encore Energy, and their work in Texas, where they've successfully restarted 2 past producing operations over the course of the last 12 months.
Maybe it's a good time to talk about that partnership with Encore Energy, as they've made a substantial investment in nuclear fuels. What are the strategic advantages? Talk about those for the company from this partnership.
Absolutely, and it's another thing that was really attractive to me when I was considering the opportunity to come and join on as CEO of Nuclear Fuels. For those who don't know, Encore Energy is a uranium producer focused on in situ recovery uranium operations in the United States. As mentioned earlier, they've successfully restarted 2 past producing operations, both located in South Texas. And that makes them the only U.S. uranium producer with 2 assets currently in operation, delivering pounds to the market. So that's something that's really important. It brings a lot of expertise and a lot of market intelligence. So really, the genesis of Nuclear Fuels is, as Encore was staying focused on restarting those operations in Texas, there was some earlier stage projects within the portfolio that weren't going to get the attention while they were focused on the restarts. And really what the idea was, the company Encore really wanted to have those projects advancing in parallel. So the idea was to put them into a separately listed, separately managed, separately financed company, being Nuclear Fuels, so that we would be able to advance those in parallel, while Encore stayed as a supportive shareholder at the corporation level with a 19.9% equity stake in Nuclear Fuels. So there's a very close, tight relationship corporately where we're able to lean on Encore's technical team for advice. And there's also very good support from the corporate level in terms of continuing participation in our ongoing financings, and overall support at the board level, where they have 2 board members representing their interest.
This might be a good time to talk about your projects in the States, in Wyoming. What are the compelling characteristics of these projects, and what is your strategy for development?
Absolutely. So we're really, as mentioned earlier, we're focused on the advancement of ISR amenable uranium projects in the U.S. with a preference for agreement state. So that really leads us to Wyoming, and that's where the focus of our exploration efforts are right now. We've got a number of projects in the state of Wyoming. The flagship is called the Casey Project. It's on the western margin of the Powder River Basin. There's a number of other ISR operations owned by other companies immediately around us that are currently in the midst of restarting. We have very, very similar geology, but over a very large land package that hasn't seen any concerted exploration efforts since the 1980s. So really what we've done is picked up on the exploration efforts that were done back in the 70s and 80s, really before ISR was a focus for the companies exploring back then, taken that information and really sort of looked at it from an ISR amenability perspective. So we've been drilling here for about the last year and a half, and have been very successful in terms of expanding on the historical resources that have been defined previously on the project, and growing those resources. And now we're really focused on making new potential discoveries on that project as well. It's worth noting too that at the Casey Project, our flagship, Encore does have a back-in right. So if we achieve a resource, a 43-101 compliant resource of at least 15 million pounds, they do have an option to reacquire a 51% interest in the project and would advance it through to production. However, if they decide to exercise that option, they would need to pay us 2.5 times their exploration expenditures and provide our share of capex to carry our 49% interest through to production, repayable eventually out of eventual cash flows. So there's a really good setup for nuclear fuel shareholders. It's a win-win situation with Encore potentially having another development property within their pipeline, and also a very low, minimal dilution to nuclear fuel shareholders, resulting in a 49% carried interest. So there's an excellent setup here, predicated upon exploration success, which is really what we're focused on with the current drill program, which is continuing on as we speak.
As we approach the end of the year, maybe you can talk about some next steps. What are the plans for the next year?
Absolutely. So we're just in the midst of wrapping up our drill program here over the next week or two at the Casey project. We've had a very successful 2024 drill campaign. We'll look to build on that for 2025 and increase the size and scope of that program, as we now have a very good understanding of the overall geological framework. So that will be a definite focus over the course of 2025. We'll probably look to start up drilling at Casey again in the spring and drill right through the spring, summer, and into the fall, similar to what we did this year. In addition to the Casey project, we'll also be focusing on our Boot Heel project in the Shirley Basin. The Boot Heel, is a very, very attractive project as well. It actually saw quite a bit of advancement during the 2003 to 2008 cycle, to the point where it actually got to the NRC from a permitting perspective at that point. So we'll look to have a drill program there next summer as well. And we're always on the continue to look out for additional properties that could fit well within our portfolio. So that'll be an ongoing focus as well.
Sounds good. We'll leave it at that. Thank you again, Greg, for joining me today and providing some updates about your company.
Wonderful, Marilyn. Thank you very much for the time. It was a great opportunity to speak with you, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks. And thanks everyone for watching. Join us again next time for another edition of CEO Insights. If you like this video, like or leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more exclusive interviews and updates.